Hey, what's up? It's your boy BobbySapphire, and today we are going through every single good meta deck in preparation for your PQ. We've got gauntlet deck lists, we've got deck tech videos, I've got gameplay links. I've created a living document, everything you need to know about every single matchup you're likely to face at your PQ. I'm going to go through the matchups today. I'm going to tell you about this document. Since YouTube videos like this are set in stone, once I make them, I can't adjust them or make any changes. What I've decided to do for my subscribers is create this document that I can update throughout PQ season. We're about to enter 2.5 months of PQs every single weekend, multiple PQs a weekend, plus Star City events, plus locals, store showdowns. We're going to have so many events. I know everyone has been bored with the stale meta, but all of that is about to change. To keep up with this, I've created this living document so as things change in the meta and things shift, I can add things like new sideboard tech, new decks that are entering the meta, anything like any gameplay from streamed events, winners, winner data. All of that stuff can go in this document, and you can get this document on the KTOD Patreon page, patreon.com/KTOD. Real quick before we get into what's in here, I've got it separated by Tier 1 and Tier 2 decks. Obviously, there are many, many decks. This will continue to expand as the meta develops. I think if you are going to a PQ this opening weekend, or maybe even the first couple weekends, if you're not playing one of these 6 Tier 1 decks, you're putting yourself in hard mode. I think that there's a Tier 2 of other good decks here, and I think that there's a third tier of off-the-wall decks, maybe completely off-meta decks that still have some potential, but maybe aren't well-placed right now. What this document does, and I'll scroll through it quick, I'll give you an example of what I've done, is sort of break down what the Jango Tarkintown deck is looking to do, its best matchups into it, in case you think it's going to be heavily played in your meta, sideboard ideas, cards that you can put in. I've got the gauntlet deck list for you to test against. I've got the masterclass video. I've got the swoop racer version where they go over all their variations from the KTOD list. And I've got gameplay with 2 premier players, John Tata and Phil from McClunky Gaming. I do this all the way down the line for all of these decks. It's 4,200 words and expanding every day. So if you're interested in this, please check us out on Patreon. But you're not here for a living document. You're here for this YouTube video. Let's talk about these decks. And what we're going to do is we're going to go deck by deck through the decks that I wrote about in the primer, and I'm going to explain to you what that deck does and sort of go through my process of when I sit down across from an opponent, this is what I'm thinking. You know, what are they trying to do to me? What am I trying to do to them? What are my best strategies? So let's check it out. All right, chances are if you are watching this channel, you've seen this deck before. This deck has become one of the most popular decks in the meta. It is really, really strong, and it is really, really popular. It is not expensive to build, which also makes it sort of a menace to deal with because of its ubiquitousness. And it's just got so many commons and uncommons. This deck is looking to, it's one of the first decks or the most aggressive ping Tarkintown decks. We don't have the ping inherent in our leader, but we've got a whole deck of people who are trying to ping us, tap us down, which is the bonus of Jango Fat, and attack base. This is an aggro deck with a built-in element of control in that so many of its plays simply hit damage onto units, which allows us to trigger Jango Fat, tap down opponent's units, and attack face. So this deck is trying to build an early board while killing one of your early important plays through Tarkintown. It's then looking to stream triple dark raids and ruthless raiders to hit you for 6 and 8 as many times as it possibly can. Look for this deck to have added things like surprise strike. Look for this deck to have added even more aggressive units, bounce units in Geonosis Patrol Fighter. You could play more tie advanced. This deck has like a 44 card happy place with all of the staples in here that you might want to build the deck around. And then it has, you know, about 5 or 6 slots that you can use for spice. In this list that Tata used to win SCG Columbus, you see the Van Breeze Flamethrower, you see the tie advanced. But the best way to go about attacking this list is preventing damage. You can either heal with something like Vigilance. Rey Blue, Mono Blue is really good against this. Any deck that can cast Vigilance for 4. Repeated Sentinels in space, decks that can play both Conquer Dom Interceptors and Bright Hope, Blue-Green Hero, can be really problematic for this deck. Snoke completely shuts this deck down. You'll see that most cards in this deck have 2 power. So once Snoke comes out, if our opponent did not save Tarkintown or doesn't have Emperor Palpatine in their list, they are going to have a real hard time getting Snoke off the ground, and they're never going to be able to do enough damage. You'll be able to stabilize easily and flip the script. Bounce is really good against this deck. You can bounce Lurking TIE Phantom, even a Ruthless Raider. Even a Ruthless Raider off Triple Dark Raid can be a really good play to just bounce it and save some of that damage. Keep in mind that Jango's flip turn, or once Jango's deployed, the pings, any damage dealt, it's not just pings, it's any damage dealt, so we can attack units into opponents' units and tap them down that way, but it's infinite once Jango's flipped. It's once per turn when he's not, so one of the things that you can do is set up to kill him at the beginning of a turn, maybe with an ECL Wrecker, and then your opponent cannot tap you again for the rest of the turn, and you're able to go free and attack base and finish them off. I would expect to face this at least once in every single PQ going forward. Next up is BOS Blue, the premier control deck. If I'm sitting across from BOS Blue, I'm definitely not happy. This matchup is a grind for any deck. It can be a real tough time, not only game one. You have a lot of ways to sideboard against it. One of the best things we can do is play Hand Destruction to try and get their Lieutenant Childson sort of offline, get them down to 1 or 2 cards. So at some point in the game, we can stop resourcing, and they really can't. They have to continue to resource to be able to get to their Avenger and Snokes and Super Laser Blasts. So if we can hit their hand while pushing damage, we can often leave them unable to match us 1-for-1 for the rest of the game because we can stop resourcing and play 2 cards a turn. But this deck gets ahead. It gets ahead on life gain and on card draw. With Pershing and Deathmark, it's going to draw a ton of cards, so you've got to have a way to deal with either Pershing, upgrades, or both. And then it uses the Client, Vigilance, Top Target, and double claiming those bounties with Bossk's Leader ability when he's flipped. You know, in this version of the deck, oftentimes people will entrench the Bossk to keep him alive and let those bounty triggers happen more often. This only plays 6 bounties, but when they hit hard. This deck now has 6 sacrifice effects. Each player chooses a non-leader unit they control to defeat their units. This is called an edict. So no turn is safe. There's no shortage of 3-cost removal here. So it's really important to play units. 5 health units can be really good into this style of deck, and they're really good against Tarkintown decks as well, so that's strong. But it has Perilous Position, Takedown, Fell the Dragon. It's just mass removal, and it's playing bombs. It doesn't have a lot of ways to kill you. This version, the Pierre version that won the OP event in UK, it has 3 Palpatines, but a lot of people don't run that many high drops. So if you can deal with them, they're on their mill plan, which can take a really long time for them to win. One thing that's a really important strategy against this deck is if you have a sideboard with 7 or 8 cards built to take out this deck and you're losing game 1, you need to concede game 1 with enough time on the clock to win both games 2 and 3, because this deck, especially if it's on the mill plan, can burn all the time in game 1. It can take sometimes 30-40 minutes just to finish that game, and then you just never have enough time to finish games 2 and 3. In fact, if you watch the OPE event streams, you'll see that both the semifinals and the finals were won on tiebreakers because the game went to time. So don't get caught going to time against this deck. Concede game 1 if you have to. Bring all your cards in. Destroy their hand. Race them down. Win. One thing I didn't mention about the last list, but in the description of this video, I've linked the masterclass, the deck text by Pierre, the deck list that you see here. Some really good matchups into this deck are Quinlan Tarkintown and Emperor Palpatine, like any Palpatine list, and then Kira Green. These blue-green matchups get even better for the blue-green if they main deck Relentless. One of the things that's really important about figuring out what to play at a PQ is figuring out first what is going to be played at that PQ. And if you think you're in a meta with a lot of Bossk Blue, main decking those Relentlesses in your green decks will go a long way to helping beat this deck. It doesn't have a lot of great ways to deal with those Relentlesses. Even though Sabine Green is in a tough spot right now meta-wise, because of how strong it is and how many people one-trick it, it's definitely going to be a deck that you see at the PQs. It's still incredibly strong. The Darksaber, Poe, especially ECL Wrecker, present insane plays, some of the strongest plays in the game. The one thing that has kind of pushed this out of the meta is the Jango matchup can be really difficult. It's basically a 50-50 matchup, and if you're not experienced in the matchup and you don't know to hold ECL for Wrecker, basically win you the game when you open your 6 resource turn by killing Jango. That can be really problematic for players. Maybe you feel too much pressure and you burned your ECL early. That's when maybe timely intervention can come into play, and you could try and claw back into the game that way. The other thing is Bossk Blue kind of short up this matchup. This deck really can't deal with Pershing very well. it has to have Fleet Lieutenant, and it can be really scary to keep a Fleet Lieutenant in hand when we don't know if our opponent is going to claim turn 1 and just open kill our turn 1 play on their turn 2. So it leads to some clunky hands if we keep Fleet Lieutenant, but letting Pershing go into Client, into Childson, and then maybe a second Childson is just insurmountable for this deck, and that's a pretty common line for BOS Blue. It's not that crazy to have that sort of thing happen, or even just multiple Childsons hitting the table. We'll see in the SCG that was won by Matt Coles here that because of Jango, he was running 3 Bright Hope main and 2 Adelphi Patrol Wing. Those numbers are kind of in flux right now because people have started to cut them a little bit. I still recommend at least 1 or 2 Bright Hopes. If you're playing against this deck, I would definitely expect Bright Hope to be there. If you're a control deck against this deck, you want to hope that they're not on the Timely Intervention version, because once you stabilize without ambush Poe or ambush Wrecker, it's really difficult for them to claw back into the game. If you're a Patreon subscriber, you know that my teammates Justin and Chrono are still working on this list. The Sabine Green thread remains one of the most active threads in the Discord, and Justin's posting all kinds of exclusive videos that I'll have linked in the living document. But you know this deck by now. This is the 3rd set where this deck has been the premier aggro deck in the format. It's going to push damage. It's going to build up its guys with things like Wing Leader and Darksaber and other experience tokens, maybe with Metal Ceremony. So look for them to overwhelm you with damage, and then even when you stabilize, come in with Wrecker, Poe, Adelphi, for a cause, and win the game that way. One of the best strategies to take against Sabine is to stabilize, even semi-stabilize early, and then start hitting them for damage. Without ECL Wrecker, you can get very far ahead in the race. Obviously, if you can get them to burn ECL early, that's preferable. But sometimes if they don't use ECL, we know that Wrecker is going to end our game. I've gone so far as to Rivals Fall my full health Rey just to not lose to ECL Wrecker. So make sure you're really balancing what you have on the board. Don't leave yourself open to dying from Wrecker. You can do if you can make your guys all die to Wrecker's when played ability and maybe maximize your HP so that he can't full 6 you with the overwhelm. That's one of the strongest strategies you can have late game when you're in that race situation. Quinlan Tarkintown is a deck that has slowly come into the meta over the course of the last few weeks. You know, it's been holiday season, so people haven't been paying super close attention to Star Wars Unlimited, but this deck just gets more and more followers. It's had more and more cash event finishes. My brother Matty, he finished top 4 at an event several weeks ago with this deck. I just won an Asajj Ventress Showcase with this deck a couple days ago. It's one that is starting to get a lot more play, and it's one of the strongest mid-range decks. It has the hand destruction package that we love: Spark, Force Throw, Kira, K2. It can sideboard further discard, Force Surrender, Pillage, more K2s. Quinlan was one of my picks going into the season simply because it was 5 health, 7 HP, even without the ping. Turns out Ping Tarkintown has become a major part of the meta, mainly in part because of so many leaders that are built around pinging. Jango, CAD, and Quinlan all doing this has really pushed it to the forefront of the meta, and we're in a heavy yellow-red meta right now. Something that's well countered by Blue-Green Control, but Blue-Green Control, the Kira decks don't actually have a great Jango matchup because of the string of Ruthless Raiders, so it's sort of pushing those Blue-Green Control, soft control decks out of the meta right now. But anyway, what this deck's trying to do is simply kill your first unit with Tarkintown and then aggro you out. It's got blasters, it's got surprise strikes, it's got high attack units, Cassian out of the row, Plo Koon to kill your leader. It has the 5 resource flip leader, so it's doing damage really quickly. This thing can clock you down really, really fast, and if you play something like play a bomb, it's still got Han Solo to come out, kill your Luke Skywalker because of the ping from Quinlan. This deck is really strong. It's one of my picks. I'm going to SCG Atlanta. I'm flying out tonight if you're watching this, and I'm likely playing this deck at least one of the 2 days that I'm playing, whether it be on Friday or Saturday. I'm not sure. I'll probably play Jango the other day. But this is one of my top picks for being best deck in the meta by the end of the season, simply because it has a lot smaller of a degree of difficulty as compared to Han, which we'll talk about in a little bit. CAD Bane is also really good into this deck, so that's another reason why CAD Bane has sort of picked up steam. CAD being able to do the ping with ambush makes it really difficult for this deck to keep a board out. And then basically any blue-green deck that can ramp and barrage you can be really problematic for this deck. So if this deck continues to rise, I think we'll see the return of blue-green soft control, and we might even see it the very first weekend here. CAD Bane is no newcomer to the meta, but his strength in the meta is certainly popping off right now. He said, oh, the whole meta is ping Tarkintown, hold my beer. He is the master at ping Tarkintown. Every single card in your deck can ping if you want. One of the things that really broke open this deck where now there are 2 of them, which is a new set 3 addition that lets you get a turn 2 Bossk or a turn 2 Zuckuss. It can let you get a turn 4 CAD Bane. It's really crazy how much that card lets this deck pop off, all while pinging and Tarkintowning their guys. Forlom is one of the best Tarkintown pairings, not even Tarkintown pairings, but ping pairings, because you can on turn 3, you essentially can do 5 damage with Forlom, right? He's one of the few things that can take out a tech or a DJ on turn 3 because of the ping. One of the other things that broke this deck open is, now there are 2 of them in McClunky being tricks. Jabba is super strong. Jabba letting you McClunky for free has become completely out of hand. Sneak attack with Ruthless Raider and even CAD Bane to clear the way, and then let all your units attack and attack last. This deck has gotten so much stronger because it's the best at dealing with 3/5s, and the meta has become full of 3/5s to try and counter the Tarkintown meta. But this deck says, no, you can't play 5 health guys. That's not going to help you here. It also lets you weaponize Bazine a little bit. A lot of times when we play Bazine in our decks, it's really neutering our early aggression. But when we play Bazine and get to ping and take a card from their hand and then Tarkintown their play, it becomes one of the strongest plays you can make. This is the version that Wu posted as a first pass. I think that there's some really interesting innovations here. I really like the Cloud Rider. I'm not such a fan of the Black Sun Starfighter, but it's certainly something that people might play. But really, what you have to worry about in this deck is the Sneak Attack Ruthless Raider or just Ruthless Raiders. This deck can just keep hitting you hard, and it's a really good answer to all the things that people are presenting in the meta. So it makes for an important meta deck. It's really strong right now. It only has a few unfavorable matchups. The things that I really like into CAD are Jango Tarkintown because of Lurking TIE Phantom. In fact, you can just play any Lurking TIE Phantom. If you play a space deck like Jango that's able to protect Lurking TIE Phantom so they can't kill it, get it off the board, you can assign all of the ping damage from CAD Bane to the Lurking TIE and never take any damage, never get Tarkintowned. It's crazy. Kira Green is also really good against this deck. It's able to ramp and go into a bigger game, and it doesn't care so much about all these pings, and it can use things like barrage or switching arenas to set up the barrage. It also can play Vaders and Mauls to stabilize. But this is a really strong deck. It's a deck I've been testing a lot. If you're in the KTOD Discord, you've seen me post about it lately. This is actually one of, if not the strongest deck in the meta. One of the things that makes it the 6th on my list of tier 1 decks, this is the last tier 1 deck that I'm going to talk about today, is the pilot skill of this deck. Is the degree of difficulty is just so high. You play against someone fully masterful with this deck like Phil. You can check out the gameplay videos that I have posted with Philip from McClunky Gaming in the description. But watching him play the game and then trying to play it yourself and match that level can be really difficult. God knows I've tried. My teammate Justin and my other teammate Alex Blandon have really been working on this deck. Alex has been championing it for a while. Justin's just picking it up for PQ season. I've started to play with the deck a little bit. It's certainly not a deck that I'm ready to take the first weekend of the event, the first weekend of PQs, but I'm going to be working on this deck for the next several months in hopes that I can get to a level where I can compete against some of those guys in a mirror match. This is really well placed. It doesn't have very many bad matchups. I think that Quinlan is a tough matchup into this. I think Kira Ramp is a really tough matchup for this deck. CAD can also be really problematic for this deck because, as I mentioned, it can kill DJ and Tech pretty simply. But this deck is the ultimate punish deck. If you use resources, if you use your attacks, this deck is going to punish you. It's going to, DJ combo you out, or it's going to cunning you and do +4 damage. It's going to drop Han Solo and kill your leader. Whatever you do, this deck is built to counter it. It can hand destroy you like nothing else between Spark and Bodhi and Kira. Sometimes you don't even get to play a card. So again, I think it's one of the strongest decks. I do think it's fairly well positioned, but those hard matchups get a lot better if you're very skilled with the deck. So get your practice in, talk to the experts, and if you're going to sleeve this up for a PQ, be ready to melt your brain. Make sure you bring some some sugary drinks to replenish the brain power. Blue Control is a deck type that just barely squeaks into tier 2. I still think it's super strong. I think that its tough Jango matchup, tough Sabine matchup has really pushed it sort of down a little bit right now. But I think if those decks get pushed out of the meta, this thing can come back with a vengeance. I think that's what makes this game really healthy, is we know the decks that are sort of waiting in the wings, and we know that when the meta is right, we can bring these back and pounce on them. Kira is certainly one of the best of these. We can find Kira in the 30-point base like this. We can find her using ECL, sometimes Lieutenant Childson. One of the things that this deck got huge help from set 3 was Devastating Gunship. It also got Merciless Contest for another sacrifice effect. You see Rune Hako in this list that was top 8 at SCG Columbus last month. Another thing that the Calculating Magna Guard is also really good. Kira is not the only way you can do this, though. We can also take a look at Blue Palp. This was the runner-up at the Birmingham event last month. This attacks in a certainly slightly different way. It's using a different kind of early game, life game with Yularen and Emperor's Royal Guard, the Black Sun Starfighter, to start and form a resistance wall. It's also, these decks can use Traitorous, which is really popular right now, especially in the Lurking TIE Phantom meta. It can be really brutal for Traitorous to come out and steal something really important. Sometimes against Blue Hero, stealing a Yoda is just GG for the whole game. You get the draw off the Yoda after you steal it. So this is what people are trying to do. And then what Palp does, because it's to go a little bit later in the game, it plays more of a robust end game with Star Destroyers like Devastator. We talked earlier that Relentless should probably go in the main deck if you're expecting Bossk Blue. But this deck can also use the client, as you see here, to life gain alongside Vigilance. Really just ramp. This deck doesn't have Overwhelming Barrage, but Palpatine certainly could. I think sometimes Palpatine doesn't play Overwhelming Barrage. If you're facing Palpatine, you kind of don't necessarily have to play around it because they just don't have an early game strong enough to set up a barrage. They're really just trying to ramp into their late game bombs. So that's something specific you could think about if facing Palpatine, but not the others. But like Kira, this is looking to ramp, hit you early, and get those barrages or removal spells or stabilization period fast. One of the things that I probably could have mentioned in Kira is that Kira, it does a really good job not only deleting leaders by flipping, but holding leaders hostage. Flipping, killing things on the board, raising her attack value, and making it really hard for our opponents, her opponents, to flip their leaders. And we could take a look at Krennic, the other version of this list. This is another version from the Birmingham event. I don't love every choice in here, but I wanted to find something that people might look for and emulate. One of the things that set 3 gave Krennic, General Grievous, is really strong. Royal Attaché also coming in, it deals itself damage and then becomes a 3-attack 2-drop, which is really strong. Krennic himself provides some restore. You can build this deck a little bit more blue than the other decks because of the early game grit units. You can be running a Hillabon Enforcer, you can be running Scout Bike. That makes Lieutenant Childson stronger. And you can really run a version of this that just uses Barrage, Resupply, Super Laser Blast, and Vader, maybe Maul. But this can be a really blue version if you wanted to go super, super blue. I certainly don't recommend Ki-Adi-Mundi in this list, but Darth Vader into Death Trooper is one of the strongest plays in the game for killing leaders. So you're getting that extra buff off the Death Trooper 2 ECL, kills any 6 HP unit with Death Trooper, so that's a strong play you can make. Krennic flipping early and being 7 health can be really strong too, just like we talked about with Quinlan. So I think any of these versions can be really strong, and I think they're well positioned if Jango Fat goes away, so keep an eye on them. So now we're getting into the real tier 2 decks. Rey Red is a deck that was really popular in set 2 and really well positioned because it actually had a lot of game into Boba Fett before he was suspended. But in set 3, she's just getting outclassed. The discard package is not strong enough with just the red cards to stop our opponents from overrunning us. The units are too small, even with the buffs from Rey, and they're getting overrun. It can be really difficult. This deck is still strong. It has some of the strongest cards in the game in Luke and Obi-Wan. Crate Dragon, Village Protector is still an insane play. Game-saving, game-winning play. But it's getting to the point in the game where you can drop the Obi-Wan and the Luke and not get overrun. That's really difficult for Rey Red right now. That said, there are only a couple decks that need to go away for her to come back. She's just getting a little outclassed by the Ping Tarkintown meta and the rise of Palpatine and the blue-green decks is also kind of hurting her. I know I have those decks in tier 2, but only slightly. I can't find a single match that she's favored into. If I had to make a grid, I think I would put unfavored into just about everything. That said, there are still people who champion her and still love her from the previous set. You know, you can see I'm linking Rodney Stubbs' list. And I've linked, he dropped a new video this week as well. He's still working on the deck. He's making content all the time. And like any good deck, the deck has followers. So check it out. I'm actually a little more into Rey Blue, which if you're a fan of K2D, you know. But I posted this. This is a Rey Blue list. I don't put this, like I didn't do a write-up on this, but I wanted to shout it out because it's really good into Jango. And with things like Spark of Rebellion, main deck restock, and Satine, we can actually outmill the blue Bossk deck. So that used to be an absolute dog shit matchup for us. And now it's kind of good. That does mean we lose points into things like Sabine and other aggro decks, which is why I'm not super high on Rey Blue right now. But I do think that if you want to be Jango and you want to be blue Bossk, if you sort of targeted them as the top two menaces of the meta, and you think that your meta is going to be filled with them, I would definitely look to Rey Blue over Rey Red. Anakin Blue is another really popular red-blue hero deck that a lot of people play, but I don't know is as strong. I was really high on Anakin when I first started playing him, but it turns out that he's really easy to disrupt by simply killing all his units. He's going to use Anakin's attack ability on his leader side to take damage to his base, powering up his later leader, but also one of the problems with red-blue and just like blue hero cards in general is they have low power, high attack. And Anakin fixes this by giving them +2 attack when they attack. So you're able to trade up into things without dying back. Now, in the Ping Tarkintown meta, it's really easy for opponents to disrupt that by clearing the board. And then what happens is a good opponent against Anakin Blue will have like 3 or 4 units out. And anytime Anakin plays anything, if you're in the same arena as it, you kill it. If you're in the other arena fully, like if you're going all space and they're all ground, you can pretty much ignore them and just race in space. The number one thing you have to worry about if you are racing this deck is bravado. Anakin can come out, if you are unable to kill him and you come really close, like there are games that I've gotten him to 29, he's disrupted me at the last minute, and then he comes out, he puts a lightsaber on him, and he bravados me for 24, and he had already done just like 1 point of damage earlier on in the game, and it's over. You've just lost the bravado lightsaber combo. Not everyone is playing bravado main, but I think you do have to play around it. It's really important to do the advanced math against this list. Know if you can kill them the turn that Anakin's going to come out. I try and finish the game before then. My strategy has been to kill the units and attack the base only after killing Anakin. So if you kill all their units instead of hitting face, Anakin will come out pretty underpowered, ideally with only 4 or 5 power, and then you can kill him without blowing up your whole board. You're also not threatened by the bravado combo, and then after that, without a leader, you can really push enough damage. Luke and Obi-Wan can kind of throw a wrench into those problems. This deck can also still play a lot of restore units, Yoda, Queel, Razor Crest, Luke. So it still has ways to claw back. But generally, if you've got a big board and they don't have any units, even playing a Luke can't save them, especially if we have our own removal or a bounce or whatever. So that's how I would approach this matchup. I don't think that it's a great choice going to the meta, but some people have hit me up that they've been working on it a lot and they don't want to switch off of it. And I completely understand that. If this is the deck that you know super well and you feel like you have game into the meta, then you should stick with it. I'm always going to tell people, and I do tell people this all the time, is I would rather play a deck that I'm really comfortable with than what someone is telling me is the best deck. Because I take Han Yellow, for example. I know that if a lot of people are telling me that's the best deck and I pick it up, I'm not going to play it as if it's the best deck. But if I've been playing Anakin Blue for the last 3 months and I know it super well, I'm going to do a lot better with that. The other tier 2 deck I want to talk about today is Palp Yellow. This is a deck that I've worked a ton on. You'll see the link in the description of the deck tech video I did on this. This comes from the UK OPE event. This came in 3rd. There are a lot of ways to skin this cat. You can go full official, you can go full separatist, you can go full underworld and play McClunky like I do. But what this deck does is it's going to try and get to that late game like all the green decks do. It's going to ramp, it's going to try and barrage you, it's going to bounce your units, it's going to steal your units, it's going to use Traitors, Change of Heart, and Palp's ability to continually steal your guys over and over. It's going to use ambush units like Bossk and Darth Vader to stabilize following the And also like this one that was at the UK event plays Droid Commando. So it can also play Scanning Officer to great effect, which completely blows out the smuggle decks like Han Yellow and Quinlan Tarkintown. And then, of course, it can do things like play Reinforcement Walker and Devastator because it's aiming to go to that late game anyway. So this is a deck that I find really strong. And with Sabine pushed out of the meta, this could be one of the strongest decks in the meta. So I would certainly be on the lookout for this. If I was facing a Palp, I would expect it to be yellow. And if I was picking a Palp for a PQ, I would expect it to be yellow. The Change of Hearts took me a while to come around on, but they're so good on any turn of the game. Palp claims, steals your thing, trades into something else you have, ideally clearing your board, right? You play something new. They can play another one. They can play something, hit for damage. They've limited their like the damage that we can do into it, and then full stabilize when they flip with Palp. This has a lot of ways to disrupt early games while ramping. It's got Bazine, it's got P38 to ping it, which makes it. The P38 was a huge addition because now Palp doesn't have to kill something. It doesn't have to kill something so slowly. It can just ping something by paying 3 and 1 action so that he's ready to flip and steal your best unit. Also, as you can see here, CAD Bane in the board, but that could easily be main. The 7 drops in green-yellow is just absolutely cracked. I would be worried if I played against this and I wasn't Sabine. I think this deck has a lot of game into things. I've had some success as Jango simply by aggroing it out, and I think that if your deck is built to aggro, you can get there, but Palp has always been good against hero decks because they're just generally not fast enough, but we'll see if Han and Quinlan are. All right, and here are some other decks that I'm following and looking to add to the document. I'm a huge fan of Quinlan Blue. People in the Discord know that I play this deck all the time and stream with it, so check out Quinlan Blue. I love that deck. Luke Green, really strong. Some people have used my list to great success in their locals. They ping me every time. They post it in the event results channel. I really appreciate that. I think Mono Blue Villain can still be really good. I've tried Kira, and I'm really looking to push it with Iden because I think that Vigilance for 4 is just too strong against Jango to ignore. And then Iden gives you that incremental life gain so she can get ahead of things like Sabine and Quinlan, and then that lock that we used to have in the first set where you can no longer play units because Iden's going to kill it and heal back, and every time you play something, you actually empower her. Bossk Yellow is also a deck that's sort of in that red-yellow vein that we've seen, but is trying to attack a different way with the insane yellow bounties. And then Kylo Yellow, also red-yellow. I just think like any iteration of red-yellow can be really strong right now, so I'm looking to see my teammates who've been working on those decks pop off with them this PQ season. If there's something that you think should be in the primer, please let me know. I'd love to add it. I added the ones that I thought were most important going into opening weekend, and as I've said, I will continue to adjust the primer living document as the season goes on with all sorts of pie charts and flow charts and deck lists and gameplay videos. So I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you do well at your PQs. I hope you come see me at SCG Atlanta this weekend, and all of the many PQs that I'm going to: New York City, New Hampshire, Augusta, Maine, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Newington, London, foggy London town, baby. I'm going to be all over the place, so come say hi. Thanks for watching.